Hello and welcome to this video in which I'm building the 2021 release of the Airfix Vickers Valiant in 1/72 scale. If you enjoy the video and find it useful, please remember to like it below, and while you're there, why not subscribe to the channel to see the other projects I've done and new ones as they're posted. This Valiant is a re-release of a 2011 kit. This time it has the option of a photo reconnaissance version with cameras in the Bombay. However, I'm going for the all-white bomber version. This kit is listed as skill level 3, partly I think because it is so big, but it also does give you 4 flying hours if you're a member of the Airfix Club and you collect them. It's certainly an imposing box, over half a metre, almost 2 feet wide, and has the usual attractive box art. Let's see what's inside. We take off the massive lid and there it all is. First is the instruction sheet. The instructions are clear and well drawn as usual and cover all the options for making the kit. Next we have all the markings, and the first sheet here covers the stencil placements. There are a lot of these, really quite a lot, especially under the engines. It is up to you how many you use. Don't feel bullied into doing more than you want. Then there is a sheet showing the 2 schemes supplied in this box. First is the photo reconnaissance version from 90 Squadron, the aircraft in bare metal all over. Then there is the aircraft I'm building, X-Ray Delta 818, which dropped the UK's first hydrogen bomb in 1957. I just love the all-over anti-flash gloss white and the pale roundels. Then we have the decal sheet. As I say, a lot of stencils. At the top are the common decals, such as the instrument panels, hoist and anchor markings and tyre stripes, although the roundels here are different for the 2 versions. Next are the decals for the 90 Squadron aircraft in regular colours. Then at the bottom, the pale set for the white aircraft. Even the stencils are in pale blue. I'm really not quite sure how this helps the anti-flash protection on the aircraft, but there we go. Probably a committee decision. Anyway, then we have the actual parts. First is the fuselage, which comes in 2 halves, including the tail fin. And then we have the wings with the upper surface in 1 piece. Another sprue has the tailplane, elevators and rudder, Bombay components, engine covers and so on. Next are some more detail and internal parts, and of course the massive wing fuel tanks. Then another with the bombs themselves, including the huge Blue Danube nuke and 21 1,000-pound bombs. There's a sprue that includes the photo reconnaissance Bombay door, as well as some refueling kit not needed in this release. Finally, there is the sprue of Transparencies. Well, that's a pretty imposing set of parts. Here I've put a 1/72 Spitfire for scale. Anyway, time to bite the bullet and start building. First I'm going to prep some of the internal parts. I'm spraying the cockpit area in black and the bombing, navigation and radio compartment and the sidewalls in this interesting green colour. I used Vallejo 970 deep green and it took ages to clean out of the airbrush. With the paint on these parts dry, I started applying the instrument decals. There are plenty for the cockpit and there's this big one for the rest of the crew. Then they all need something to sit on. The pilot and co-pilot get ejection seats painted in black. The rest of the crew get these seats. The back is painted in a tan colour, light tan colour, and I'll pick out the pilot straps on the ejection seats in the same colour. Then the seat pads are painted in leather brown, and then the rest of the frame in the same dark green as before. Most fetching. Next I'll make the control yokes for the flyers. There's a yoke that attaches to an arm, and this arm sits in the side console for each pilot. Next I'm going to glue in the 2 ejection seats into the cockpit area In retrospect, I'd not do this now. I'll explain why later. Anyway, I then add a crew ladder, which I'll have to paint black as well. While all this sets up and to dry, I need to make a modification to the tail. There is a piece here that the instructions say you need to cut out if you're doing this bomber version. This is for a different tail cone. Now, I'm really not sure why this couldn't have been done in design, as this was needed in the original kit as well. But there we are. I'm using a photo etch saw blade and my craft knife to do the cutting. Remember to cut just slightly too little off. You can always sand more off, but if you cut off too much, you'll be needing to use filler. That done, everything's dry enough so I can put the 3 crew seats into the lower compartment, then add their desk and instrument panel to the back. There are 2 small side windows that need to go in next. As usual, I'm going to use a PVA type glue to help prevent any chemical fogging that you can get from polystyrene cement. Excess of this glue can just be wet brushed away. Then the cockpit assembly can be set into the fuselage. It sits very solidly in place. Then behind this, I'm fitting the front wheel well. Next in is the rear cover of the cockpit assembly. Now, the instructions say do this at this point. I think it would be easier to wait until the fuselage halves have mated, then slide it into place. I think you'd get a better fit. This is why, incidentally, you would have needed to leave out the flight deck ejection seats. They can slot in later. Anyway, this way is what the instructions say to do. Next thing to do is the structure of the cavernous Bombay. First, the front bulkhead fits into the end of the roof, and then you fit the rear bulkhead. Now, if you're having the Bombay doors closed, then this part you leave out completely. The whole Bombay structure can then be fitted in place in one side of the fuselage. And then we need to add ballast to the nose. The instructions say to add 22 grams. I've added 30 grams of airgun pellets just to be sure. I use PVA glue to hold them in place. So now it's time to join the fuselage halves together. They go together very well, I think. I'm just going to add one more piece now, a fillet between the wheel well and Bombay, tape the whole thing up and leave it to dry. Once the fuselage is set up, I am going to add the open Bombay doors. Now these need to sit against the fuselage walls, so I use some reversed clamps to push outwards onto the parts. Just make sure they're not too strong or they will split the fuselage open again. Now I can check out adding the tail cone and make sure that I can sand everything to fit. Whilst things are setting up, it's a good time to do things like pre-painting parts on the sprue. First of all, I'm going to do the fan blades for the engines, and they get a coat of steel paint, as do all the wheel hubs. I'll also spend a bit of time to glue up the bomb itself. Once that dries, it will need quite a lot of sanding to get the joint marks out. Then I can paint it and add the bomb grip. I'm also going to prepare the clear parts for paint, the canopy and the bomb aimer's windows. I've purchased a pre-cut set from Edward. Its catalogue number is CX299 if you want one. Just peel off each part of the mask with a very sharp craft knife and make sure the edges are smoothed down properly to prevent any leakage. I can also make a start on the wings by gluing up the engine inlets. Now, I've already painted these with gloss white on the inside. Once they're assembled, I can add the turbine discs I painted for the engines. I've already added some weathering powder to make some contrast there. Then those inlets can be fitted to the lower wing surfaces. You can see here 2 3mm diameter holes you need to drill out for the wing fuel tanks if you're fitting them. I'm not, so I'll leave that alone. I can just go on to fit the undercarriage bays. With that done, the wings can be glued together and clamped up to set. Again, I'm making use of the downtime by getting on with a few other bits and pieces. Here, the tyres. Now I've found they fit very snugly onto a lolly stick, and this is really good to keep them in place while you're painting. I'm also going to paint the nose wheel tyres. All of these, incidentally, entire black. Next, there's the upper nose to fit. There are different upper noses for different versions of the Valiant. Note, you can see already I've done a little bit of filling onto the fuselage joints to get them absolutely smooth. Then comes the biggest join of all, fitting the wing section into the fuselage. Now I found it was easiest to slot the tail end in first and press down to fit the front. The pieces go together very precisely and very snugly, I must say. More big pieces next. First, the horizontal stabiliser or tailplane. This comes in two halves, as do each of the elevators. So set them all up, then you can assemble the tail. The horizontal stabiliser itself slots into the front of the fin. Then you can add the elevators at the back. Now I use a clamp on each to hold them into place at a neutral angle. You can do the ailerons as well next. Each again comes in two halves. When they've set up, they fit into slots on the outer end of each wing. The twin engine exhausts slot into the rear covers, one on each side of the aircraft. These then get added to a cutout on the trailing edge right at the wing root. Next I am adding the transparencies to the model. First the huge canopy on the top and then the bomb aimer's position on the bottom. And you can see from the masks that most of both of these will end up being painted over. A quick top tip here. Now I'm doing my aircraft with an open door, so I'm fixing a little offcut of plastic to the closed door, which is a different piece. It doesn't have a hinge. I'll put this into the door frame with just a dab of PVA glue to keep it in place. Then I can spray the whole aircraft and not have to mask off the door. Fit the open door at the end. Onto the undercarriage now, and I'm fitting the hubs to the tyres. Only use a tiny dab of glue for each one, as the fit is pretty secure. Next I'll fit the nose wheels to the nose undercarriage leg. Now these have square pegs, so the wheel and its mudguard thing are aligned correctly. I'll add bits of weathering to the undercarriage as I go along. It helps accentuate the contours of the parts. Next up is the main gear, 2 wheels per side. You need to make sure the weighted flat spots are at the bottom before securing the wheels with a dab of glue on the axles. When they've set, I'm going to add some more weathering powder to the legs to make them stand out, also to the sides of the tyres to darken them, leaving the treads looking used. Then with all the undercarriage I'm adding some oil stain on the joints and the wheel hubs. It's a subtle thing, but it makes a huge difference with just a hint of colour on all this aluminium. I'm also going to paint the inside of the undercarriage doors with aluminium. I've already sprayed the other side with white. I'm also painting the inside of the open door with interior dark green. I've sprayed the whole kit with a few coats of gloss white from a Humbrol can, and I'm adding a few ancillary bits like this fuel pipe and then this air inlet under the wing. And now I can paint the interior parts aluminium, such as the inside of the Bombay and the wheel wells. I hope you've got enough aluminium paint. The jet exhausts I'm painting in steel. It has a bit more sheen than the aluminium, and the inside of the pipes is a mix of brown engine soot and black. On then to the bit I think makes an aircraft really come alive, the decals. As the kit has a gloss finish already, they will go on very easily. Some of the decals, like this one on the spine, are quite long and they will need quite a bit of finessing to get into place. As I mentioned before, there are lots of stencils, especially under the engines. But we persevere and just work our way around the aircraft. Just keep a lookout for stray bits of dust or even hairs. The biggest problem with the decals is on the tail fin. Now the colour goes over these little triangular vortex generators, and the decals are not designed for this. So what I've done is put them in place and then put on a lot of a decal softener. I use Microsol for this. It kind of melts the decal into place, but it still loses its shape. Eventually I just painted in the missing bits. Microsol, by the way, is what we use to help settle decals into the panel lines as well. One other thing Airfix missed is that the door decal supposes you're having a closed door. If you're having an open door, you'll have to cut this emergency instruction decal in half yourself. Aim to cut the blue line here about 1/3 of the way down from the word door. The door part of the decal can then go onto your pre-painted door whilst it's still on the sprue, and the rest of that decal can now go on the side of your fuselage. Some of the tiny decals you may or may not wish to use are these witness marks on the tyres. These show if the tyres have moved against the rims. Back to actually making stuff, and I'm fitting the Bombay Door struts at this point and painting them, yes, you guessed it, aluminium. After that I can fit the bomb on its release into the Bombay. The next job I'm doing is picking out all the panel lines. Now normally I'd use weathering powder mixed into water, but for this gloss finish I'm going to use well diluted black paint as I think it sticks better. There are a lot of panel lines to do. With the decals and panel lines dry, I can add a final gloss varnish, then start taking off the window mask. A sharp tip blade in your craft knife is really useful here. Time to fit the undercarriage at last, main legs first. These slot into holes in the wings, they slot in very firmly, and the bracing hinge fits well. These legs will be very, very strong when dry. I'm also going to fit the nose wheel, again a very robust fitting into the fuselage. While I'm there, I may as well fit the doors. The inner half of each main gear door fits onto this small part first and then gets fitted to the main legs. Now there are 4 pins on each door that help locate them against the main gear legs. Then there are the outer main doors. These simply glue into place. Now Airfix say they should be at an angle of 83 degrees to the horizontal, to which I say best of luck with that. Now if you're going to do this for a competition, then I guess you can just make a jig or something, but just off vertical is near enough for me. Now I can take off the closed cabin door and fit the open door in place, and I'll add a brace to it as well. Add the wingtip probes and the kit is done. The Valiant is a challenging build, mainly because the size of it, but it is well worth the effort. It looks stunning in anti-flash gloss white, but also pretty sharp in bare metal or camouflage. It's a very nice kit of a slightly forgotten bomber that saw the main UK tradition to the jet age and the Cold War. Now I hope you've enjoyed this build and found the tips and comments useful. If you have, please remember to like it below, and while you're there you can subscribe to my channel to look at other builds and future projects. You can even buy me a coffee if you like. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.